Greetings, people of Earth. Welcome back to this windy spring day. My name is Jax, and today I wanted to share something that guides a lot of my philosophy and how I make decisions, things like that. And it's a simple sentence. You already know it. What if I'm wrong? So, this perspective came to me when my dad and I were sort of organizing some business stuff. We were doing some stuff here on the farm, and we had several decisions to make. And at one point, my dad was sort of anxious about everything and, putting our necks out on the line, that kind of thing. And I said, okay, Dad, well, if we're wrong, what's the worst situation that could happen? And since then, it has very much guided my philosophy, how I interact with people, and basically it removes any kind of assumption that I might have about a situation turning out the way I want it to. And this is how it works in practice. This is how I go through life asking myself, what if I'm wrong? What if I miss something? What if I'm not seeing the full picture? What if something across the world affects the decision I make? Essentially what I do is I'll come up with a plan or a set of goals, or I'll try and visualize what exactly I'd like to achieve, what exactly I'd like to do. And this can be as deep as where do I see myself in 5 years, or it can be as trivial as interacting with somebody at the grocery store. And essentially what I tell myself is, okay, Jax, you know how you want to interact, you know how you want to go forward and make your future your reality. But what if you're wrong? What if you didn't see something coming? What if there was an extenuating circumstance that nobody can predict? What if the stock market crashes, for example? And what I do then is I try and imagine making this decision and then everything wrong that could possibly go wrong in my head does. If that doomsday scenario really isn't that bad, okay, I can do that. I can get through it. If the worst possible thing imaginable could happen because of my decision, and that worst possible thing I can think of is still okay, I'm still respecting other people, I'm still staying true to my character, I'm still trying to lead my life with wisdom and love. If that worst case scenario really doesn't sound that bad, I'm okay with making that decision. I'm okay with saying go to a business proposal or some kind of thing that I'd like to do. Another good example of this was when I decided to start really getting into fitness and gym stuff. And my mom was a little worried I was getting a bit obsessed with it. And I said, well, Mom, I see what you're saying. So what if I'm wrong? What if I get a bad injury or, start hanging out with the wrong group of people? I just went through as many situations in my head as I possibly could about, could this decision lead me down a bad road? And I really came to the conclusion that, okay, injuries happen, mistakes are made. Maybe you don't stretch one day and you pull your ACL or you tear it, or, something like that happens. And I went through this scenario in my head. Okay, well, what's the worst that this situation could bring me? What effect would the worst impact be on my family and friends? And after going through that little thought process in my head, as the little overthinker that I am, I determined that if I'm totally wrong, it's still a pretty good chance. It's still a pretty good life. There are ways to recover. There are ways to get over your difficulties and your issues. And to not make the decision would almost be worse. And so to ask yourself, what if I'm wrong, really takes your ego out of the situation. It really makes you think, okay, I could be really wrong about buying a farm or doing whatever, but at the end of the day, I'd still be on the farm. I'd still be able to embrace the lifestyle that I love, the freedom and the quiet of this world. Like, the nearest person from me right now is over 1 kilometer away. I kind of like that. I don't know. For me, if I'm wrong, I'm still kind of right. And taking a bet on certain situations, there might be some downsides, there might be some negative consequences, but at the end of the day, I determined that the worst situation possible was still pretty great. I still have my health, thankfully. I do things cautiously and with care and consideration and compassion. But at the end of the day, you do have to make a decision. And so by asking yourself, what if I'm wrong about this situation, you kind of avoid that. Another good example I have in my life that happened a while ago was an interaction I had with somebody, and I really thought this person identified as like a cis male, you know? And there was this nabbing thing at the back of my head saying, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just assuming? And, well, if I'm wrong, I could really hurt someone's feelings. I could make them feel like they don't belong, and that somehow me not validating how they are might hurt their feelings. And I felt like, okay, if I'm wrong, that's kind of a jerk thing to do, to just make an assumption. And I know some people who watch this don't have the same sort of system in place for that particular situation, but I'm hoping that you're not taking this as me trying to be hypersensitive. I'm hoping you're taking this as me trying to explain my thought process and say, well, you know what? It takes 2 seconds to just be careful and a little bit compassionate. And if I'm wrong, there's quite a big, problem. Like, I've missed something in my philosophy of treating people with respect and always giving them the benefit of the doubt. So I just said, you know what? It's too much of a risk to hurt someone's feelings, so I'm not going to do it. And it's a great example of why asking myself, what if I'm wrong, really helped me make a decision that ended up being really the right decision to make. I didn't say anything stupid. I didn't act aggressive. I didn't have any assumptions going in about how the person would react. I just said, well, if I'm wrong, it's kind of a big deal. So I just choose not to be, because the downside was nothing. It was just treating someone with respect or making a generalized assumption that might hurt someone's feelings. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to do this for everything, but if you have a goal in your life, if you have something that you would really like to do or become or learn about, just ask yourself, what if you're wrong? What if the assumptions that you have about why this decision is so great aren't true? What if for one reason or another, not necessarily just because you're a malicious person who wants to hurt people, but maybe you just didn't see something, and having that little forethought, that little backstop in your head saying, wait, this decision might be great, but what if you're wrong? What if it's not going to turn out the way you are? And if it does turn out the way that you didn't think, is that still worth it? And if your brain in that quick moment thinks, yeah, no, I think this is good, I'm going to take a shot, I'm going to take a stab at it. Great. You have led your life with some compassion and some thought, and you've been really careful about your decision. So that's all I'm advocating for. As an overthinker, I think a lot of us are overthinkers here. I think it's just a healthy mentality to have. It doesn't have to lead to a neurotic obsession with, oh, if I'm wrong. And it doesn't have to lead to a fear of failure, because we all fail. We all make mistakes. But it can be something that just gives you that pause and say, what if I'm wrong? I'd love to know your thoughts. This is something that I really believe in. I've really stood by, and knock on wood, it really hasn't done me wrong yet. It hasn't led me to really regret a decision I've made, because I'm cautious about it. So thank you for listening. Comments down below, respectful, nice, productive. Let's have a conversation. And thank you guys again for watching. And now I have farm work. So I hope you're having a beautiful day, week, month, year, whatever you're having. I hope it's amazing. And as always, guys, I will talk to you tomorrow.